Alrighty, so today we're going to be talking about JoJo. No, not that one. That would actually be enjoyable. We're talking about this one. Now, this couldn't possibly go downhill or anything. Nothing's going to go wrong. Okay. In all seriousness, how's everybody doing? We have a new episode today. Obviously, we do. If we didn't have one, you wouldn't be watching this right now. Unless you're not watching this, that would kind of suck. But if you want to see more of this, whatever this is, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button, maybe hit the bell notification icon. That way you'll be able to see when new episodes come out and when live streams go, well, live. So for those of you who've been around for a while, you know that the next part is fan art, and then we're going to get into the actual content. The fact that I even get fan art is still weird to me, especially some of the stuff you guys come up with. Speaking of strange stuff, we have How I Feel About BGR Every Time I Go Over One of Their Articles by Baphomet. And then we have Communication with My Short Self by Jack and Quill. And then finally, we have a Podling Suris by the Three-Eyed Cat. As always, thank you all for your fan art submissions, whether or not they're cursed.
I see you, Tommy McMurtry. The pumpkins are coming. Do you like us? Are we pretty?
So, Jo Jorgensen. I have been seeing her stuff on my Facebook feed for weeks, and I get it. Nobody really wants Biden for president, and nobody wants Trump for president, at least not in my circles. So we talk about the third-party options, and one of the ones that has come up is JoJo. So I decided to take a bizarre adventure through all of her policies. This is not going to be an exhaustive expose on JoJo, but this is going to hopefully give you guys a little bit of an idea of what she stands for. What is your stance on abortion? Pro-choice. Well, that's at least a good start. Do you support the legalization of same-sex marriage? Take the government out of marriage and instead make it a religious decision. Now, I've got a few problems with this. One of mine is that where marriage is concerned, one of the biggest reasons to do it is for the financial incentives, the tax breaks and stuff like that. The other issue that I have is that if you leave the ability to marry only in the hands of religious organizations, those same-sex couples are not going to be allowed to get married. Most religious organizations will not marry same-sex couples. Should gay couples have the same adoption rights as straight couples? Yes, as long as they pass the same background checks as straight couples. Kind of a weird way to just say yes. I'm not sure why there's a yes but there. I would figure that that background check doesn't have a special if you're gay, you're perfect sign, but okay, I at least agree with it. Should employers be required to pay men and women the same salary for the same job? And no, according to her, the government should never be able to determine what a private business can pay its employees. On the surface, this is something I want to agree with, which is the case with a lot of things that are libertarian. But unfortunately, as is also the case with a lot of things that are libertarian, they work under the axiom of maximum freedoms means maximum good. But that's not always the case. Without some way to regulate the pay of businesses, businesses will exploit their workers, and businesses in the past have exploited their workers just because of the color of their skin or their gender. The libertarian response to this is usually that with competition you can just go to a different business that's not going to exploit you the same way. But historically what tends to happen is that all the businesses start playing by the same rules because they know they can, and if they're all playing by the same rules, then it doesn't matter what business you go to. You may be treated marginally better or marginally worse, but the underlying problem of equal pay will still be there without some type of regulation. This has historically always been the case. Large corporations are not your friends, and large corporations are also not individuals. Trying to treat them like individuals to give them maximum freedom does not actually help the individuals whom they end up exploiting later on down the road due to your negligence. But don't worry, I'm sure that Walmart, McDonald's, Burger King, Target, Academy Sports, and practically every other major business would just, as soon as any regulations were taken away from them, start paying everybody more. What a deluded fan. Should there be more restrictions on the current process of purchasing a gun? And she says no. Now please, take this with a grain of salt, as this is coming from somebody who is incredibly pro-gun and a leftist, because, well, if you're not pro-gun and you're a leftist, how do you plan on defending yourself from a tyrannical government? How do you plan on engaging in a revolution or anything like that? How do you plan on doing any of that without a gun? You can't. So, again, I'm pro-gun. However, in the current system, it is far too easy to get a firearm for most individuals. Yes, it varies state by state, but that's something that needs to be handled at a federal level. And the reason is, if you look at our country compared to most other developed nations that have better gun control laws than what we have, you find that things like school shootings and stuff like that end up going down in those countries. And gee, I wonder why. It's almost like with smart gun control, you can have people who are responsible citizens with guns and firearms that are able to defend themselves perfectly fine, but you can minimize the amount of people who have firearms who are not supposed to have them in the first place. And to the conservatives in my audience that say that gun control means somebody's going to come and take their guns, stop being paranoid. Not everybody thinks in binaries like you do. Should the government introduce a stay-at-home order to combat coronavirus? She says no. And I think this, as with most libertarian policies, falls into the strange phenomenon of utopian thinking. Here's one of the ones I'm torn on. You see, a stay-at-home order is a very useful tool for stopping the spread of a virus. The problem is, like with a lot of other programs, it requires foundational programs to exist to begin with. We shouldn't have to spend months and months and months in delegation over whether or not we should get a measly $1,200 to protect citizens from going, homeless. There should be things like rent and mortgage freezes in place that force everybody to play on an even playing field while they're not able to make any money. Unfortunately, this means that I'm kind of split down the middle on this. Were we in a better country that didn't have a dystopian view on human life, then I would be disagreeing with Joe. I find myself somewhat agreeing that stay-at-home orders are largely ineffective, though, because our current environment does not support them. Do you support the impeachment of President Donald Trump? She says no, this is a partisan show trial. But the question was not, do you support what the Democrats and Republicans are doing surrounding the impeachment process? The question was, do you support impeachment of the president? And in the case of the pseudo-fascist president we have here, I would assume that a libertarian worth their salt that believes that freedom is an actual axiom they should be working with would think that the authoritarian should be impeached, yes. But I guess JoJo's maybe a bit too much of a coward for that one. I mean, she is the third-party candidate, so I can understand fighting uphill both sides. But if one of those sides is completely and totally antithetical to everything you stand for as a politician, then maybe don't lick the boot on this one. Should marital rape be classified and punished as severely as non-marital rape? And she says yes. And consensual sex with a spouse under the age of 18 should be classified as statutory rape. Now, I was with you at first. Marital rape should, in fact, be punished just like non-marital rape. However, there is the caveat that you decided to answer about statutory rape. Now, while in most cases, yes, I do believe that if somebody is 17 and there is an adult trying to get into their pants, that is in fact a problem, but there are some instances where you need to consider that that's not actually the reality of what's happening. You can have somebody who's 6 weeks older than another individual, and so eventually, de facto, they will be 18 before the other individual is 18. They will be 18 for a grand whole 6 weeks. During that 6 weeks period, if a parent just doesn't like the boyfriend or doesn't like the girlfriend for whatever reason, they can then get them jailed for statutory rape through just being vindictive. I personally know people who have had the parents of their spouses that they would later have who have threatened them with that when they went to high school with their spouse. This strikes me as something that's coming from a good place, but the end result is going to harm people who are actually causing no damage and doing nothing wrong. This is why we have things like Romeo and Juliet laws. Should the government order schools to be closed in order to combat coronavirus? She says no. Because yes, allowing the one place that is a constant hot zone for infectious diseases to constantly run rampant with people with little to no regulation is perfectly A-okay in JoJo's mind. Who cares about the teachers that are basically going to be sacrificing their lives on the way there? And who cares about grandma that your kid's eventually going to kill when they come back with a deadly virus? Nah, we should be free to sacrifice our educators on the funeral pyre of freedom. Should the government increase environmental regulations to prevent climate change? She says no. Okay, so this is either coming from the position of more freedom's more better, the more free everybody is, the more better everything is, which is the libertarian position in the United States, or this is coming from the position that climate change isn't real and therefore anti-science. If we look at one of her other policies, we can figure out which one it is. Should the US acquire Greenland? In which she says no, the US should also drastically reduce its global footprint. So at least she is coming at this from the perspective of somebody who's not a climate change denier. She's actually accepting the scientific consensus on climate change. However, she is engaging in reality denial. If you believe that the United States should be lowering its carbon footprint, and that carbon footprint is mostly contributed to by large industrial organizations, but you're not willing to do anything to actually stop them from lowering their carbon footprint, then what do you actually expect to lower that carbon footprint? You want it to go away, but you don't want to do anything about the problem. What do you think is going to fix this shit? Fairies? Like, no, I'm serious. Do you, as a person, as a thinking, breathing human being with brain cells that clug together to make synapses actually give you the ability to think, do you, as that person with that capacity, believe that businesses that do not have a profit incentive for lowering their carbon footprint are going to actively engage in that without us, the people, doing something about it, through the only mechanism that us, the people, have ever had to do anything? Democracy or revolution. And if you don't like democracy, well, everything can just go on fire. That'll help the carbon footprint, right? Should health insurers be allowed to deny people who have pre-existing conditions? And Joe says, yes. Okay, if you're going to believe in a policy like this, not insuring people who have pre-existing conditions and not doing anything about businesses that engage in that kind of practice, which basically means that people who are disabled are incredibly fucked. Like, if somebody loses their insurance at their job and has to get private insurance 20 years down the line after they've been having their issue dealt with through their insurance company that they've had at their job, and the private insurance is allowed to say, no, fuck you, then they're screwed for the rest of their life. And you, as an individual, you, as a person, would have been the one to enact a policy that let that happen. Through no fault of the disabled person, through no fault of their own, they are completely and totally screwed under this system. Something like this can only really be supported if you're willing to allow a government or single-payer option so that people can get the help they need if they're screwed in any other capacity. Do you support a single-payer healthcare system? She says, no, the government should not be involved in healthcare at all. Full stop. So, yeah, if somebody is disabled, they're completely and totally screwed. No government help for them at all under Joe's system. If you're disabled, or if you have any type of pre-existing condition at all, you're completely and totally fucked. And if you want to say that, oh, well, just find an insurance provider that won't have pre-existing condition clauses, unfortunately, most insurance providers are going to do what they can to get their profits, and that includes not accepting people with pre-existing conditions. Libertarians like JoJo tend to think of businesses as individuals, and all individuals left to their own devices would try to make the world a better place for everybody, but businesses are not like individuals. Businesses are generally predatory. They are faceless companies that are trying to do nothing but increase their bottom line. Under unregulated systems like this, businesses get to thrive while individuals get to suffer. And since businesses aren't people, there's only a handful of individuals under that business that get to actually thrive. You create the material conditions for a much worse world. And this is an issue that I've had with the libertarian position for a while now. This is because that position works under a single axiom: personal freedom. But personal freedom for yourself is not the only axiom we should be working under when constructing morals, and therefore when constructing laws. When you work under a system like this, you eventually find yourself in the situation where every man is an island, and any policy that does not treat every man as an island ends up getting thrown under the rug. But policies like that can end up having a net benefit to society that helps everybody survive. Hell, in cases like with climate change, it literally helps the planet survive. But nah, fuck all that. My freedoms! That's what's important. Thanks, Joe. Should the government regulate the prices of life-saving drugs? Joe says no, the government should never regulate the prices of private businesses. Right. Because I can't think of any possible negative side effect that would come from allowing a business to do anything for profits, and allowing a business to, say, put the price of something like insulin so astronomically high that people with diabetes have to choose between insulin and food, or insulin and rent, or insulin and the vehicle they use to get to work so they can actually provide a living wage to their families. But they're not going to get a living wage because people like Joe don't support a minimum wage, much less a minimum wage increase. This is the problem when the only axiom you're working under is freedom, and I hope that this list, as inexhaustive as it is, shows kind of that thread. If it is about personal autonomy and personal freedom, and it can lead to a good, you will probably agree with the position that Joe has, or the position will lead to a common good, like something like being able to be pro-choice, policing your own body, having bodily autonomy. But there are negative and harmful positions that can be taken when you work under freedom as your only axiom, when you have no way of measuring net good or net positivity. If only personal freedom is what matters, and you do things like grant individuality to corporations instead of treating them like mechanisms for good or ill, then you wind up in situations where corporations are able to exploit people with life-saving medical drugs, or exploit people by preventing them from getting care when they desperately need it. If everything is privatized and everything is private business, and private businesses are treated as individuals with their own autonomy, then we get this situation where people are denied healthcare, where people are denied certain rights. All in all, this is the reason why I'm not going to be voting for a libertarian, especially not Jo. Do I think she's a bad person? Probably not. But I do think when the only thing you care about is freedom, you lose the bigger picture. That's not to say freedom isn't important. Again, I mentioned earlier, stop thinking in binaries. Just because I don't find freedom to be the most, utmost, importantest, most bestest thing in the entire world covered in fucking chocolate, doesn't suddenly mean that I do not value freedom. If you constantly think in binaries, you're being a child. Or I guess you're being Obi-Wan's version of a Sith. Only Sith deal in absolutes, right? Either way, if you want an exhaustive list over all of her policies, then I will have a link to that in the description below, and you can make up your own mind. After you've done so, please let me know in the comment section below what you think. Like I showed in here, there are some policies of hers I agree with, and there are some policies of hers that I think are incredibly freaking damaging. And almost all of that stems from the fact that they're working under one axiom. This is not a robust moral system. This is not a robust system for making a set of laws. This is a very childish system. It is a selfish system. So I guess the best thing to do would probably be to end this video on a couple of things. First of all, if you got to this point in the video, then thank you for the view. Thank you for everything that you guys do to keep my channel going. And secondly, I think I'm actually going to end this on some words from the late Christopher Hitchens on libertarianism. From a C-SPAN interview from several years ago, Christopher Hitchens says, "I've always found it quaint and rather touching that there is a movement, libertarians, in the United States that thinks Americans are not yet selfish enough." I don't think I can end on any better words than that. So if you're here, these are the Patreons. Patrons. The people who pay for this channel to function. These are the people who actually like throw their hard-earned dollars at me for me to make videos and stuff. So that's cool. Anywho, yeah, these are the patrons. I feel weird. I'm actually doing this part very off the cuff, and I'm not editing for some reason, and I feel like I'm going to regret that later. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comment section below, and maybe thank the patrons for allowing videos like this to continue, because otherwise I would not be making enough to actually do my channel, at least not for any length of time. That all said, thank you all for watching the video. As always, insert end of video tagline here.